Hey guys, it's me, Jakey D. Welcome to part 2 of every Easter egg in GTA 5. In the last part, we were explaining the mural. We looked at the Mt Chiliad UFO and the 5 symbols found around the mountain. We explained the UFO symbol and the cracked egg symbol. And in this video, we're going to look at the jetpack symbol. We're going to explain the connections between the Altruist Camp and the UFOs. And while we're at it, we'll also connect them to the satellites. These videos take a lot of work. Thanks for your patience, and thanks so much for all the love and support on the first part, the YouTube shorts, and the TikToks. I see every like, every comment, and with all that said, let's continue the Easter egg hunt. Now heading back to the mural, we've got one more symbol to explain, and that is the jetpack. Now apparently they did add a jetpack to GTA Online via the Doomsday Heist update, but you have to keep in mind that anything that happens in GTA Online is an afterthought and was definitely not a part of their original plans to do with the mural. Now when it comes to GTA story modes, the only GTA that has actually had a jetpack is San Andreas, and that came out back in 2004. And if we look at San Andreas and where you actually find the jetpack, you first find it in a mission that takes place at Area 69, which is of course a military base. And if we look at GTA 5, the only military base in GTA 5 is Fort Zancudo. And if you come to this spot where I am, you will see green lights circling on the ground. And these lights begin at 1 AM and then they get gradually more intense at 2 AM and then very intense at 3 AM with a light beam coming down once you get close enough to see it. The light beam seems to be coming from nothingness, but if we fly up directly above this location, of course we're gonna find the UFO. Now this UFO is by far the coolest looking UFO, and aside from this UFO looking different, it does have the same sort of powers to the Beam Me Up UFO, so it can cut the engines to your vehicle while making similar sorts of sounds, as well as it has some very cool little details on it, such as you can find the words all around the UFO that say Segregate and rearrange, and when you rearrange the letters you can make Easter egg. And these words are also next to egg symbols. This is also the only UFO with character models inside of the UFO that you normally cannot see, but thanks to my mods, we can take a peek inside. And these are of course humanoids because it does look like a military UFO version, of course being above the military base. It also looks like the word segregate is on both of their right legs, which is probably just coding issues because I don't think anyone was actually supposed to look at these humanoids. There's also danger signs on the top of the ship with arrows, and then on the bottom of the ship with little triangles around it. Now I assume that these are like the weapon parts of the ship, but if we take a closer look at that triangle, there's 3 corners that are like circled in and a circle in the middle. And if you look at where the UFOs are found on the map, aside from my badly hand-drawn triangle here, it looks very similar. And you guys remember how on the mural it shows the Mt Chiliad UFO as an eye looking symbol? Well, if you put that eye looking symbol on the map, then it looks a lot like the Illuminati symbol. And I'm curious if anyone has any ideas as to why there are human footprints on the end of the wings. Is it just to say, hey, this is man-made? Now there is actually another explanation for the jetpack symbol. So if you go to the Altruist camp between 7 and 8 PM as the sun is setting on the horizon, if you look at the slab of concrete, you may notice that the shadow on the slab of concrete looks a lot like the jetpack symbol. Now at first I thought this was just a coincidence. I didn't really think much of it, but as I've looked into this more, I have found a few potential connections between the Altruist camp and the UFOs. So the camp is located between the Mt Chiliad UFO and the Fort Zancudo UFO. And when you look at the graffitis in the Altruist camp, you can see lots of different sun symbols. Some are yellow, some are red. And then some of the yellow suns look like an eye. And you can see some of the writing says things like see the eye. Now I believe that the suns actually represent the 2 UFOs around the camp. So if we go back to Fort Zancudo and we start start off with that light beam that was on the ground, the spinning shape on the ground looks a lot like the sun symbols. And then if we go up and take a closer look at the UFO, and we look at it from beneath the UFO, you've got the yellow cameras in the center, which I think would represent the eye. And then the 8 points of sunlight around the sun could be represented by the 8 blue points around the cameras. And then as for the red sun, the Mt Chiliad UFO is red. And look, I mean, this Mt Chiliad UFO, you can't really get a good look from underneath it, but in the game files, there is a game file called the spinning anus. And when I spawn it in using mods, it is the same sort of model as the Mt Chiliad UFO. And looking underneath the UFO, once again, I can see like a sun looking symbol. However, instead of 8 rays of sunlight, it has 6. But if you really need to connect the 8 rays of light, then if you look at the center, you can actually see 8 squiggles, which looks a lot like one of these suns. And just to verify that I'm not spawning in some wacky UFO model, you can also look at the Beam Me Up site UFO, which is also the same model as well. And looking underneath it, this one does have the light open up in the center, so it does look a little bit different. But again, it looks like the, red sun beams on the outside of it. And taking a closer look at the Mt Chiliad UFO, it actually looks like the light beam is closed at first, but as you zoom into the UFO, the light beam part opens up. So it's like a mix of the two models of the spinning anus that I spawned in and the Beam Me Up UFO. I also don't think it's a coincidence that there's 8 rays of sunlight on all of the sun symbols at the Altruist Camp, and you can see the Jetpack symbol at 8 PM. So that might be like the ultimate meaning to the rays of sunlight. I have seen people also mention how the bat that is a part of this Jetpack is also on the FIB symbol. There could be a connection there because the Mt Chiliad and Beam Me Up UFO are both FIB UFOs. Another thing potentially linking the camp to the UFOs, there is a path that goes from the camp up to a little hill with a little radio tower and a little satellite dish. And when I line up my camera with the satellite dish, which is actually pretty hard to do, and then I fly forward trying to see what the satellite dish is pointing to, it does take me in the vicinity of the Fort Zancudo UFO. And it's definitely worth noting that the area around the UFO is actually pretty small. And if you're not in this small vicinity, you won't hear or see this UFO at all. And to get the right altitude for this UFO is also pretty difficult because unlike the UFO at the Beam Me Up site, which is all the way up to the very top of the skyline where you can't go any further up, the Fort Zancudo UFO is hovering somewhere in the middle, so you can't go too high or too low. This definitely could just be a coincidence, but I still found it interesting nonetheless. And I think one of the last references in the camp to the UFOs is regarding the sunflower graffiti. There's 3 sunflowers all at different heights, and the 3 flying UFOs are all at different altitudes. Although after looking into it, I think these could actually represent the satellites, which the satellites are known to be mysterious themselves because at nighttime there's a green light, and it looks like they're roughly pointing in the direction of the 2 UFOs. One is pointing slightly right of the Fort Zancudo base, and all of the others are pretty much pointing in the direction of the Beam Me Up site UFO. There's also a symbol on the back of the satellites which might have 8 total points to it, but you can only see 5 points, and that could represent the 5 petals on the flowers, as well as the 5 red lights on the front of the satellite with a green center could also represent the 5 petals and the center of the flower. But that's not all, because the roads around the satellites I think look like the stems of the flowers. I mean, just look at how these flowers line up. Am I losing my mind? Quite possibly. It's also worth mentioning that there is a triangle symbol in the center bit of the satellite, which looks a lot like the Illuminati symbol, which we have seen before. There is actually some other weird stuff to talk about with the satellites as well. In the Xbox 360 and PS3 original versions of the game, FIB agents could be seen near the satellites, where in the enhanced versions of the game, which I'm sure everyone has by now, it seems like you can just find scientists there with the name James Smith. Now, when I was trying to find possible references to James Smith, I came across a James Smith actor that played a scientist in a UFO documentary. And I got very excited. I'm like, oh my god, here's a cool reference. And then I did some more research and I realized James Smith is the most common name in the United States. And then I dug a little deeper and Rockstar had a James Smith working for them as a game tester on GTA 5. So I'm kind of bummed out because I thought I found a cool reference, but it's most likely nothing. And that, my friends, was part 2. In part 3, we're going to explore the lines on the mural and how they connect the symbols on the mountain to the other UFOs. And we'll explore lots of cool little details in the next part that I don't think anyone else has really spoken about. Once again, any support you guys leave on this series is so appreciated, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the near future. With all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.